Lord, just thank you for tonight, and thank you for just the opportunity to come before you and be in your presence, Lord, and allow the word to speak to us. I ask, Lord, as I teach, Lord, that I be filled with your Holy Spirit, that you use me as a vessel to share your word. Help me to stay focused. Help me to just block away those distractions, Lord, and just have confidence in you. I pray for each individual here and online, Lord, that you open up their hearts, open up their ears, Lord, and let that word be planted in their hearts, Lord, and that we can take something away from tonight. We say this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so here we go. Once again, a little backtrack. David's winning victories. He's conquering the kingdom for the Lord. He's collecting stuff for the temple. He's raising up, people that are in ghettos, lost in the wilderness, blessing them, showing kindness, doing all these wonderful things. And here we see David just, what a great guy, man. He's really winning battles for the Lord. And then we get to chapter 11. And I titled this one, and I don't usually title stuff, but I thought this was pretty prominent titles. I titled it Our Choices and Their Ripple Effects. So what we're going to see is multiple people in a particular chapter having opportunities to make choices, and those choices that have ripple effects. I think this is, for me, the first time that I've really seen just almost like different stories of different people. We'll see like broad stories of so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that, but there's many people in the story that have an opportunity to make a choice, and either they make the right one or they don't, and we'll see the consequences from that. So let's start off on verse 1. We're in chapter 11, verse 1. And it happened in the spring of the year, right, at the time when the kings go out to battle. When was that? When the kings go out to battle. So we have to remember that. That's the big one in verse 1. So the king should be in battle right now. That David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Right? So here we see David should be where? Going to battle in the springtime, right? Instead, he sends Joab and the servants with him and all of Israel, right? And they did their duties. They were diligent and they won the battle here, but David remained at Jerusalem. And another version that said tarried. I like that word tarried, just hung back. I pulled this from Benson's commentary because it kind of breaks down the verse pretty well. Right after the year after the year had expired, or right in the springtime, it says, when that year ended and the next year began, which was in the springtime, right? So that's the time when it was when the kings go forth to battle, which is when the ground is fit for the march of the soldiers and brings forth provision for man and beast. David sent Joab and all of Israel, all of his soldiers, right? So he sent the whole crew to really do some work. And they destroyed the children of Ammon, laid waste their country, and killed all the people that they could meet with. So they wiped them out. But David tarried still in Jerusalem, right? Or he remained in Jerusalem. He committed the care of this war to Joab and did not himself go out to fight as he had done against Hadadezer. Had he been now on his post at the head of his forces, he would have been out of the way of this temptation. So that's really huge, right? And I'm very thankful I get to teach on David because this is me in a nutshell. Like so many different areas where, right, I find myself in the same situation as David. I have a victory and a stronghold in my life, and instead of staying diligent and staying in the will of the Lord and what he's called me to do, I ease up on his purpose for me and become what's prideful and complacent, right? So my question to you guys, and this is something you just want to just make a side note and ponder this week, what are some of the areas in your life that you've conquered but feel a sense of complacency that starts creeping in, right? Could be mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I want you to ponder that. I want you to really dig deep because there's something in your life that's there that you're not acknowledging, right? As we see David, certain things in his life, right? We'll jump forward a little bit here with his wives, multiple women, right? That seed of sin that's been planted in his heart for so long is now, right? We're seeing some of the fruits of that. Second question, what has the Lord called you to do for his kingdom, but you have passed on the responsibilities, have not put forth any effort to fulfill that purpose? For me, it was teaching. God called me many years ago to teach. I ran. I did my own thing. I had seeds of sin in my life that I wasn't willing to destroy because I thought I could handle it, and they kept popping up and getting me when I was tarrying too long at whatever it may be, right? So those are the two questions I want you to remember and to ponder those and to really dig deep, because there's something. It could be this big, right? But a seed starts this big, right? Your seed might be producing fruit now, right? But we need to acknowledge that and confront that. So let's move on to verse 2 through 5. And this is where we really get into the meat and potatoes of everything here, right? And so then it happened one evening, David arose from his bed and walked onto the roof of the king's house, right? So here he is getting up out of his bed, waking up, walks out to the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, right? And the woman was very beautiful to behold. So David sent and inquired about the woman, right? So here he's looking. Well, she's pretty good looking. So hey, does anybody know who that is? Right? He's pondering, he's looking, he's not looking away. And so he asks who it was, and somebody says this, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Even though he knows, okay, this is somebody's wife, right? I'm going to send messengers, and this is the next verse here. Then David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him and lay with her, for she was cleansed from her impurity, and she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, so that she sent and told David and said, I am with child. Right? It's just one step out there for David. Here this, we know he's a lustful man because he had multiple wives. He never dealt with that in the beginning. He sees something that he likes, being the king, right? Pondering, asking questions, stewing upon it, right? Letting that kind of take root, right? Not squashing it down. I always I call it a Bobism, right? Right? It says the first look's on you, the second look's on God, right? So this is on David because he looked, he saw that she was beautiful, he even inquired about her, then he even sent servants to her house. I want to dissect this a little bit better because it's such a huge couple verses here. Instead of David being in the Lord's will, being out with his army, he was resting on his victories, right? Chilling out, hanging out, not keeping his guard up. With his guard down, temptation strikes from a distance, and David had a choice, right? What was his choice? To walk away or to tarry at this moment in lust, right? He stood there and pondered and just let it really stew. You see, David never rid himself of the sin like we talked about, right? And this is now we're seeing the fruits of it. All that stuff back in his life, this is now a manifestation of this. And what it drew me to was Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 through 9. It says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. But he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good. For in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Right? So what was David sowing? Right? Seeds of lust. And this wasn't today. It wasn't this moment that caused this. It was the many moments from way before with him having multiple wives and lusting and not, right? He wouldn't collect the horses because that was something you don't do, right? The king should not collect horses in time of war, right? But it also says don't collect wives as well. But not that, because I like that. That's something that I'm okay with. But here's that manifestation of those seeds taking root. In the verse here it says, and let us not grow weary doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Did David lose heart? I don't know. He didn't. To me, it almost seems like he did because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. He thought, you know what, we're doing real well. Job's doing a great job. I know I should be out there, but you know what? Let me just send him out. And what happens, right? Temptation, just like that. When we're not expecting it, we're waking up from a nap, maybe sleeps in the eyes, we're just chilling out. And that's how temptation really hits us hard. When usually we're not expecting it, right? For me, the temptation was, working all day. Just started basketball season, so back to 2-hour practices, right? Getting home, sleeping, getting the studies in between, The fatigue kicks in. I was ahead in the study a little bit, and you start getting lackadaisical and thoughts thinking, I'm okay, I got this. And all of a sudden, bam, it hits you. Temptation comes. Start realizing in my study, man, maybe this shouldn't be part of it. So I start reaching out to brethren, right, which we should do when we have those moments of temptation or we're down. And I'll mention here Paul. Paul was able to help kind of get me from under in the woods and really set me on path. But here David is following his own lustful desires, and we're going to see that this is taking him into a bad spot, right? So David didn't look away. So we see in 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, and this whole verses 2 through 5 plays out really well here. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but of this world. So we're seeing a snapshot of that verse in this whole entire thing, right? Lust of the flesh. David's lust was never subdued or put in check, allowing, right, a cheek in his armor, right? We talked about that, the women in his life, right? He always had a thing for them. And so he always had that lust of the flesh, right? The internal desire to what? To look, to seek, to find. If I see something pretty, I want it, I'm going to take it. The lust of the eyes. David looked enough to desire this woman and see she was beautiful, right? Go back to the Bob thing. We see something, oh, that's right. We see it. We can look away, and that's on God. But if we decide to go back and to seek it and lust after it, right? Lust of the eyes, we're gonna see that it's gonna cause sin. And then the pride of life. And this is a pretty prominent one because I think as humans we're pretty prideful people. I don't think we realize it. You know, I would say not as much in the Christian walk, but just in general, right? We think that we're in control and that we can kind of handle things our own way, right? David is now taking this woman, even after hearing she is married, right? Who is this? This is Uriah's wife. I'm going to send servants to go get her because, I don't know, I'm going to talk to her, see what she's doing. Maybe we don't know that what was going on in his head, but here he's moving forward and pursuing this woman. Even Uriah is one of the 30 mighty men, right? He sends for her knowing that he's the king and that she'll do as I say, right? That power trip, the pride of life. I'm prideful, I can do this, or thinking, oh, I'm just going to talk to her, I'm fine. I've heard it said by some pastors to never, right? Men have, counsel women in a room by herself or things along those lines, right? And what's David doing? He's doing just that. He's has enough pride in himself to be like, I can handle this, right? Right? That's conjecture, but just think about what's going through his head. The intent of the heart was the lust, but now he's bringing her to him and, right, tempting him even greater. So here's another verse that explains where David is, or where he's headed. It says, it's 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 6. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. Right? Pretty powerful verse. This is actually one of my favorites because of that whole word, be taking things captive, right? And I'll cover that here a little bit later. It says, I wrote, yes, David was lusting on the flesh, but the battle was where? Where's the battle for us? In your brain, right? The whisper, the decision to make, right? It's not a sin to just look, right? But it's to lust and to feed on it and to really desire that, right? In David's situation. I love this verse because it gives us a wonderful example of the warfare we are to engage in, right? It says that this isn't between you and I, this fleshly warfare, right? The weapons are not carnal, right? But they're mighty in God, and that's my favorite part. It's not mighty in you. It's not you going, I got this, I can do this, because are we going to fail? At some point. Enemy is crafty. Enemy is very sly in how he's going to attack us, because we might win a victory here, but like we've seen the last chapters before, the enemy comes back, but in a different form and is ready, and sometimes even greater. So when these thoughts or strongholds in our life rise up, We must turn to God and take these things captive. How do you take something captive? Right? Do you just tell it to go somewhere? No. Right? You have to, in the spiritual sense, physically grab it, throw it somewhere, watch it. And I'm right. When they put somebody captive in a jail, what do? They put it in a jail cell and they put a guard there, right? So that's where reaching out to somebody like we talked about prior. Hey, I'm struggling in this area. I'm going to take this thought captive. Here it is. I'm watching it because guess what? I can go like, the thoughts will come in and I can go like, Lord, help me with this. 2 seconds later, it's back. 2 seconds later, it's back. It keeps coming, right? The battle could be like we saw with Joab before, the miraculous, and God takes care of it without us having any effort. But sometimes we saw that we need to get the king involved. And the king, right, for us, Jesus, and really attack what is trying to come after us because we're noticing that the battle is in the mind, and unless we take that captive, right, these strongholds, and casting it down to the ground, right, that we're going to get attacked via sin, right? And because that's going to be the fruit of what happens once we get broken down mentally. So like we read in the previous chapters, the battle could be won without the physical effort, or we must fight for our lives, but the constant in the battle for victory is having obedience to God and following our captain or our king, right, his lead. A verse that spoke to me through this here is James chapter 1, verses 12 through 15. Blessed is the man who endures temptation. For when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone, but each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. That's the chapter. So I can stop right there if you guys want me to. If you want to read that again, this is the whole chapter, right? It's crazy. And we're seeing David, right, drawn away by his own lust. God's not tempting him, right? But he is now letting sin manifest itself. And now we're seeing this sin full grown. The seed that was before with all the lusting of the wives, it's full grown. And guess who's going to die? We know he's going to die, right? We'll see moving forward, it's Uriah. David doesn't die, but his actions, like we talked about before, the consequence of our actions have ripple effects. It's going to affect one of his mighty men. And I wrote, remember the first part of this verse when we read about Uriah. Let's read that again. Blessed is the man who endures temptation, right? Is Uriah going to be tempted? He is in a different way, right? David's going to tempt him. When I first started studying this chapter, I was a sympathizer for Bathsheba, right? I thought, oh, here's this poor girl. She got the knock on the door and the servants came and she was scared and probably thought my husband is dead or I'm in trouble and I must go with them. And, she probably was scared to some degree, right? I thought David strong-armed her into lying with him and she had no say in the matter, right? Bad David, king, just, using his strength just to, lay with this married woman. I mean, what is she going to say? What is she going to tell him? No, right? I mean, the king could put her to death for disobeying him, right? That's exactly what she should have said, right? No, and died, right? This reminds me of us in the world, right? Government, jobs, somebody telling you to do something that's against your faith. Are you willing to stand your ground in the face of losing your job, right? Losing something that's valuable to you and potentially losing your life. Have we not seen in the past history many of these apostles, many of these martyrs? What did? They die for Christ. We got it pretty easy in this world, right? But moving forward, it's not getting easier. It's going to get harder. So are you going to be willing to stand up for what is right, even in the face of the king or the face of the government, right? David's choice to lustfully seek Bathsheba tempted Bathsheba into sin, and now we see the sin has literally given birth to which will lead to innocent man's death, right? So I'm going to ask you, what will you do? Will you justify saving your own skin or obey the Lord in the face of the consequences? So ponder those things, You got to start prepping yourself for these battles. This isn't something you're just going to decide, I can do this. Like, that's where the repetition comes in, right? We're going to see that with Uriah, right? He's a very disciplined individual. I mean, to be able to go through these temptations and all that, and to do what he does, I got more out of Uriah's story than anything that we're going to see, because we're going to hear about Uriah here in the next verse. Little quick side note. This is kind of weird, right? So something to note is that Bathsheba was taking a bath, right? It says that she was cleaning herself of her impurities, meaning her menstrual cycle. This is important to note because that means this pregnancy was by David, right? Since Uriah was out in battle and she had her cycle. So he was out in battle, she was cleansing herself, he wasn't around. So this is a pretty prominent thing for us to know, because that's really telling us this is David's child. It can't be Uriah's, because where was he at? He was out in battle. And it almost reads as if, the other part I found interesting is that once he laid with her, we don't hear anything from her for quite some time until when? What does she say? I'm with child. So that must have been a month or a little bit more, right? Hey, I missed my cycle. Oh, he cast her aside, right? This is conjecture. This isn't in the Bible, but think about it. We don't hear anything until she says, I'm with child. So he didn't want a relationship, it sounded like, her until she says he with child, and that probably freaked him out, because now your sin is going to be exposed. So let's move on to verse 6. Sorry for backtracking there. I wanted to cover that because that's a pretty important thing for us to know. So here we are, verse 6. Then David sent to Joab, saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah had come to him, David asked how Joab was doing and how the people were doing and how the war prospered. I actually laughed out loud when I read this, because you talk about small talk, right? Here's a guy that just slept with Uriah's wife. Hey, Uriah, how's Joab doing, and the people are doing in the war, right? Even knowing he has this intent to deceive him moving forward, right? Just wanting to move forward and get on to the next part. So we're starting to see David in his manipulative ways, right? So real quick, who's Uriah? Uriah, his name means the Lord is my light. He's one of David's 30 mighty men. He was a Hittite by nationality and a Jew by conversion, right? There's a lot more to it, but pretty awesome dude, right? Being one of the 30, being out in the battle with Joab. So let's move on to verse 8 through 10. And David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah departed from the king's house, and a gift of food from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. So when they told David, saying, Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, did you not come from your journey? Why did you not go down to your house? Right? So now we're seeing Uriah making his choices, right? I think we forget, right? And everybody in the stories, they're dealing with their own individual things. And this is kind of how it is in life. We're all in the what time? The present. But you're going through your own temptations. You're going through your own temptations. Same with me, right? And my actions could affect you as well. And we're seeing David's actions affect Uriah. Here he's being tempted, right? Go down to your house, wash your feet, kick back, right? We're going to, a gift of food I'm going to send with you, right? That's something every guy would want to do. Go see your wife after battle. Go sleep in your bed. Go have some nice food, right? And we're seeing the discipline and the commitment of David to doing the Lord's will and to being a good servant and brother to his fellow soldiers, right? We're seeing the true character of Uriah, right? He's a mighty man of 30, but he decides to go lay down with the servants because he knows that that it's not for soldiers to go lay with their wives during that time, right? I forgot to write down the verse here, but there's actually a verse that speaks of that. Paul had sent it to me, so forgive me for not putting that in. But he's sticking to what he knows what's right, even in the face of temptation, right? David was faced with temptation. Is he failing? Yeah, pretty miserably. But yet we see this man being tempted with food, right? With a woman. And yet he goes and lays with the servants at the door of the palace, which I thought was pretty awesome, right? So we're seeing that, right, with even Mephibosheth, servant's heart. So that's the message we're starting to see here for the last 4 chapters. You're either going to disobey the Lord, or you're going to fall down and have a servant's heart and obey what God's saying. So, right, just a little side note there. I could imagine the look on David's face when he was told that where Uriah decided to sleep, right? He must have just been like, what are you talking about? He knows what Bathsheba looks like, right? He's like, man, you should have went there. My plan is failing. I got all these meat. I was kind of joking with myself. When he asked the servant, what happened to Uriah, I was noticing them eating like a drumstick of meat, saying, I don't know where, he went to the servant's house because they had all this food, right? Did the food go to the house? Who knows? We just know where Uriah went, right? Slept outside with the servants. So let's see. I said, I looked at these next verses as Uriah's testing from the enemy, even though it was from his own king. So sometimes our temptations and sometimes our battles are going to be with those that we love, those that are in our old household, those that are our own leaders, right? But we're seeing with Uriah that we must have that servant's heart and do what the Lord says. So verse 11. And Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. Man, another great example of Uriah's character, right? He's more concerned with the things of the Lord and his fellow soldiers instead of his own desires, right? I'm sure he would have wanted to go home, sleep in his bed, see his wife, rest up, but I'm encouraged by Uriah's discipline and commitment for his calling in the kingdom, right? I think it's those spiritual reps, right, that we must not be afraid of getting into, right? When we are tempted and we do fail, that's an opportunity to grow. I always tell my basketball players, you only learn when you lose, right? Because when life's good and you're winning, I'm doing well, everything's fine. But what are the opportunities or what are the things in life that we really learn from when we make mistakes? Because then we learn from them and move on, right? Let's go on to verse 12. Then David said to Uriah, wait here today also, and tomorrow I'll let you depart. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Now when David called him, he ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And at evening, he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to his house. Right? David realizing how, I think David's realizing how committed Uriah is to his calling, right? He even tries to get him drunk. What does alcohol do to the brain, right? It takes you out of your right frame of mind. It makes you make bad decisions. How many times have you heard of somebody do something stupid and say they were drunk, right? But even here, David's busting out all the stops that he can do, and he gets this soldier drunk, and Uriah, what? But he did not go down to his house. Where was he? He went out to lie on his bed with the servants, right? Stuck to his guns. Man, that's pretty foundational character. Even in the midst of somebody deceiving you, getting you drunk. Once again, we're seeing David's manipulative ways, man. He's really, really trying. And here we're going to see he's almost throwing in the towel to a certain degree. Proverbs 31, chapter 31, 4 through 5 stuck out to me. Just talks about, kings and wine, right? So it says, it is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. But Uriah didn't. Pretty powerful. Maybe that was David's hope. Forget the law. Forget what I told you. Get drunk. Go do what you're going to do and get your wife pregnant, right? But rats. He's sleeping outside again. I mean, you imagine his face. He was probably looking outside his palace going, come on, get out of here, right? And Uriah just sticking to his guns. This really shows me what sin can do to someone's character, speaking of David. When they're trying to hide it and remedy the situation on their own, right? He's not reaching out to God. He's trying to fix this. We see David in the previous chapters showing kindness and trying to bless people to a man of manipulation, deceit, and lust. What areas in our lives are we trying to fix or hide that we know are sinful and hurting us or other people, right? So once again, these are just little tidbits for you to dig deep, right? Bring these before the Lord. So let's cover chapter 14 just to end here. I'll read it and I'll explain to you why I finished it here. Verse 14 through 17. In the morning it happened that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle and retreat from him. that he may be struck down and die. For it was, while Joab besieged the city, that he assigned Uriah to a place where he knew they were valiant men. Then the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite died also. Right? So strike one, couldn't do it with the go sleep with your wife and have good food. Strike two, get you drunk. Right? Didn't go down, sleep with your wife. Strike three, I'm going to kill him. I'm not going to do it. Okay, you're not going to do it. Joab, you do it. Send him out so it looks like he just dies in the battle. Who's involved now? Right? David had a decision not to look at Bathsheba. Bathsheba had a decision not to sleep with David. Uriah had the decision to go down to sleep with his wife or to obey what the soldiers are called to do during the times of war. He made the right decision, but now Joab has a decision to obey the king or to do what he knows is right. And what does he do? Sends his own mighty men into the battle, turns his back on him, sends him into the hottest part. And Joab's pretty smart, right? He was able to go out in a few chapters ago and see the armies in front of him, and the armies behind, and go, this is what we're going to do. So he's pretty knowledgeable in the warfare, so he knows exactly where to send him, sends him into the area. And who else is affected? Where does it say that? And some of the people of the servants of David fell. Other warriors too were involved in this, right? So now Joab's actions are now affecting Uriah, and now it's affecting these other men. They probably had families as well, right? We don't really read that, but it's something to assume, right? Now David's recruiting Joab into his sin. What a sad picture of a valiant soldier, right? Take his death notice, right? Here, Uriah, take this to Joab, not knowing this is his death warrant. Mighty soldier, and he's valiant, man. He's probably ready to get back to work because that's what he's been longing to do. Takes us to Joab, right? This is Joab's moment to decide to sin or to obey what is right. What was in the letter shows me David must have pondered this intently, giving definitive direction to how Uriah was to be killed. It's a plan. It wasn't just take him out and stab him. This is exactly how I want you to do it, right? Send him out in the hottest part of here, blah, blah, blah. And Joab was willing to do that. Uriah, being a valiant soldier, would think nothing about being in the forefront leading the way, right? He would be willing to charge with his buddies. But by Joab's command, he involves his soldiers to commit treason, right? Joab's commands, he tells these other guys to turn and leave these guys here, involving them as well, and put not only Uriah but other soldiers in to win this situation. I ended here because I thought that was pretty prominent to say in Uriah the Hittite died also. The plan worked, did it? I guess according to David. So the verse that really spoke to me through this, and this is because of David, Romans 6, and I didn't put this on my thing, so it's Romans 6:23. For the wages of sin is what? Death. Is it Uriah's fault that he died? No. Was it because he was being obedient? Yes. I think that's what I've been learning out of the most of this, is that God's promises will be there for me, like with all my shortcomings and whatnot, right? And all my sin in my life. I notice when I go back to God's promises, there's my hope, and that stops me from moving forward in sin, and it allows me to repent. David's not at that time right now, right? And it's causing adultery. It's causing people to sin with him. Is Joab a murderer? Yeah. He's implicated in this sin, just as bad as David, right? But David's the king. He should know better. So going to leave it at that. Paul's going to take over from here. I just want to share with you what God spoke to me for these last 4 chapters. It was the God's promises. We are victorious through God if we decide to fall down on our face as servants and allow him to fight our battles for us, taking down those strongholds. I'm going to encourage you guys to take your thoughts into captivity and be physical with them, be aggressive with them, just like David was, right, when he decided to take the kingdom over, right? But unless we are having God fight our battles, right, and taking those thoughts into captive, because it has to be a balance, right? So faith without works is dead. Right? Don't sit back and think God's going to do it all for you, right? be productive. That's what I've learned with doing my studies. The word is there not to make you feel good, but it's there to get into your heart and speak to you and change you if you're willing to allow it to. So moving forward, remember those questions that I asked you and really dig deep, because our job now is to take this and go out into the world. This isn't our safety bubble. Let's get out there and let's fight the battle for the Lord, correct? All right? Amen. All right, Lord, thank you for just your word, just the power of it and the example of King David and Uriah and all these moments that show us that you are faithful if we obey you. And I ask that for us moving forward, help us to be obedient in reading your word and filling our hearts with those seeds to cast out into the world, Lord. Help us to reach out to our neighbors, to bring them closer to you, Lord, and help us to let our light shine. In Jesus' name, amen.